Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Leaders in Astrology series. Today, we are delighted to introduce esteemed astrologer, author, and lecturer, Carol Tebbs. So thank you so much, Carol, for joining us again today. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
Wonderful. As I've told you before the recording, I'm so excited for this interview. So thank you so much for joining us today. And this one's going to be a little bit different. We have a wonderful presentation that you've put together, which is 50 years of international astrology growth. And this is through the experience and memories of yourself. So I'm very, very much looking forward to this and the stories that you'll have to tell us today. So thank you so much for putting this together.
Thank you, Callum. Yes, I do have lots of stories, and I'm looking forward to sharing them. To start off, how I even got into astrology. In the early 1970s, I think it was 71, I was going through a difficult part of my life. And one of my friends says, "Oh, Carol, you have to go see an astrologer." And at that time, I considered myself an academic. I thought, that's hooey. I'm not going to do that. Finally, I caved in and I called AFA and just said, "Is there an astrologer in my area?" And I got a name and I gave her only my birthday. That's all. And after the consultation with Elaine Madigo, I said, "I need to know how that lady did that. She nailed me." And so I started, okay, I'm going to look into astrology. Well, the story is, in my life, I'm born in Columbus, Ohio. No astrologers ever come to Columbus, Ohio. Even if you're there, you couldn't find astrology books in the 1970s. And then, I moved to Los Angeles, a suburb of Los Angeles. Even the local library didn't have astrology books. So if you had to go to Hollywood or downtown Los Angeles to find a store where you can even find an astrology book.
Wow.
So, of course, you get the big fat volume of the A to Z horoscope maker. And then I found Church of Light, and that was kind of led to other things. But in the bookstores knew who was traveling because there was no internet. There was no Zoom. And so astrologers, to advertise themselves, would travel nationally, internationally, and on tour.
So you had to go to these, like you've got here, the hubs of astrology, these major cities where it was happening at that time, or even internationally as well. But in the middle of the Midwest, it was just not the same. Nothing.
Yeah, and I wasn't particularly interested then either. But once I was in Southern California, I thought, oh.
What would have been the reaction in the Midwest at that time if you told people you're interested in astrology, or just you wouldn't mention it?
Going to church.
Oh, of course, going to right.
It's astrology over at Zip Gobbin's house in Los Angeles. No, in the Midwest, it was not unusual that people lived and died in the same town that they lived in their whole life. Nobody traveled, even across America back and forth, much less internationally. Now we are on Zoom with people all around the world. It's changed so much. But anyway, so after at the bookstore, I was told about, hey, there are local meetings right here in Los Angeles, close by. The Hollywood, Los Angeles are back to back. Zip Dobbins. So I went to a meeting at Zip Dobbins. She had a house, a nice big house, and there was a chapel out back. It was had a dais and platform and seats for about 30 people. And every Sunday, one of these traveling astrologers would be speaking. And then afterwards, we would gather and for a couple hours and chat and mingle. And sometimes there were only 10 or 15 people there. Sometimes it was packed, but usually it was, a handful of us, maybe 15 or 20.
I think I've said to you before, but I'd love to have been a fly on the wall at that time, just to hear the conversations and take it all in. I mean, it must have been an incredible time and an incredible experience.
Now, Marion March had her astrology school, but she showed up only at the big gatherings, maybe once or twice a year. But Lois Rodden lived in Hollywood.
Wow.
And we spent a lot of time at Lois Rodden's house. Doing 3x5 cards, transposing all of her birth data that she had collected from famous people onto 3x5 cards. This is before computers, BC.
Wow. BC.
And shortly after, in the late 70s, BC became AD and there were computers and it began to be digitized. But we've sat in Lois's living room many hours.
Wow.
Filling out the birth data, handwritten on 3x5 cards, so you had a file.
So maybe for beginner astrologers or younger viewers, can you explain the importance of these fantastic astrologers as of yourself?
Well, first of all, they became world famous, and even they were world famous at the time I met them in 1971. And they all became very close friends. But they traveled on tour all around the world, just like other people came to Los Angeles to promote their work. Lois wrote a column for Sidney Omar. She was his ghostwriter. And she made the scrolls that you get at, as you check out the restaurant, there'd be a little bowl there with little scrolls you could buy for $1 that had your horoscope on it.
Wow.
And Zip traveled all around the world, and she was, they were the greats in modern astrology.
Wow.
This is before any of the translations happened, but nonetheless.
So at this time when you're in LA, is this a time when you're learning astrology, or have you been learning? So you were learning from these greats. Incredible.
I'm learning. I fell into it and they become close friends. So, in fact, I used to room with Lois Rodden at all of the conferences.
Wow.
And indeed, at one conference, Lois was putting together her data that was going to be digitized. I guess it was late 70s. And she said, I have the data graded in terms of AA, it's birth certificate, it's really, really good. And then there's A that, it's from memory, or it's good data, but it was from at hand to mouth, so to speak. And then she says biography. Yeah, I have people in that category. That might not be as reliable. C is caution, take caution. She says, but I can't figure out anything about the other data that's not correct, that there are 2 or 3 more birth times. And so I think I've told you this before, but she liked martinis before dinner, so we had 1 or 2. And I said, well, what about dirty data? She said, you got it. so that happened.
So thanks to you, we've got dirty data from Carol Tebbs. That's how we got it, through a couple of martinis, and it was dirty data, and that's how it's been now. If you go and pull up your charts and you see the DD, it's Carol Tebbs, the dirty data.
And the irony of it is, Callum, my specialty is rectifying birth time. I have a book out on it. I've had 2 books out on it. I hadn't made that connection yet. And I thought, oh, duh.
It was meant to be.
Yeah. So here in this slide, after the talk, these people, I sat down with Michelle and Francoise Gauquelin, sitting out on the patio, drinking coffee or iced tea, whatever, was there. And they're chatting about their work and work change. I'm all part of that. I'm a student. I'm not I'm not in their league, but I was there. I was, like you said, the fly on the wall. And again, these people, became friends. And so, there were lots of them. Alex Ruperti came, Bruno and Louise Huber, Layla Rudder, Claude Weiss, John Addy. This is a picture of John Addy. Even John Addy was there. He was an old man then, and just he passed away probably, 5 or 6 years later. And the newbies, the new astrologers, good recognized astrologers, Rob Hand and Lee Lehman. When they were in town, they were there.
It's strange to hear that them being young new astrologers at that point.
They're younger than I am by about 15 years. Lee and Rob, I think, is about 3 years younger than I am.
Wow. So you're the senior position now.
Well, except for Bernadette Brady, all of these people have gone.
I just had an interview with Bernadette, and she was fantastic. That was great to speak with her.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, I happened to be at the right place at the right time, and I was a sponge. And I mean, who could go wrong getting it straight from the mouth of the people who write the books that we read? So then, once I had enough instructions from Marion March, Zip Dobbins, and Lois Rodden as to how to delineate a chart and what we knew in modern astrology then. And again, I say the ancient texts had not been translated at this time.
And this was before Project Hindsight and all these different projects. Yeah.
We didn't know there was a difference between a day chart and a night chart.
Right.
Sect, we didn't know about that.
Sure.
So we have all been relearning our astrology as all of those works of translation came out.
Incredible. I would like to ask on a personal note, did you have support from friends and family back home? Did they know what you were doing at the time when you were having these amazing experiences?
The Ohio people, well, by then my grandparents had passed away. And I have a couple of cousins there that, I had been gone long enough. I had been in the Southern California area for probably 20 years by that time.
Oh, wow. So you already bolted out the door a long time ago.
Right. I'm just saying that in my roots, I would never have been exposed to astrology at all.
Yeah.
And indeed, now I'm out in the country in Oklahoma. There's no astrologers here. I tell the people, all you would need to know is in your farmer's almanac. It's all the moon phases, everything's there.
Yeah.
No, they're not into astrology.
Sure.
But then came the situation. ISAR was going through a troubled time. There was a big fallout about management of ISAR. It was created by Julian Hewlett, and its birth was in Ohio. But most all of the major astrologers left ISAR. And so at that time, Peggy Lance, who happened to be president of the local chapter, went to a conference, and she saw Juliet, who was the president of ISAR, and she said, listen, if you're going to close down ISAR, how about you let me take home all of the documents that you have, and we'll move it to Los Angeles, reincorporate in Los Angeles, and it only works with new leadership. So Julian agreed.
Wow.
And so finally in 1979, we have it, what do I mean by certified? I mean, it's 501c3 organization. So Peggy, and indeed for 20 years, I mean, we had no money because everybody had left. So we were fishing for new people, and they came bit by bit by bit. But the people who were willing to step up to the plate to be president, it was either Peggy, Roxana Muse, or myself. Zep Dahmens, Lois Rodden were on the board. They didn't want the job.
Right.
Ron Tiggle, he's now Dr. Ron Tiggle, research coordinator for ISAR at that time. He didn't want the job. Got Marguerite Darboge, she was secretary. She didn't want the job. And in fact, it was Mother's Day, one of their board meetings, and I had a house full of family. I said I couldn't, no, I'm not there. I got elected president.
So it was you.
Yeah. I got notified, Carol, you're president now of ISAR. Okay. But again, that rotation went on for about 20 years. But what happened is I learned to be a leader. I mean, I was already teaching school, so I was, I had position there and spoke on a daily basis. But here at conferences, we would go to an international conference, AFA or whatever was around, and we would then have a gathering of ISAR members. And so I was, I'm here, here's Axel Harvey, and, you have Brian Clark from Australia, a couple from Mexico who were the big astrologers in Mexico, Brian Clark, Lois Rodden, all of them. But through that time, I began to have a good sense of ISAR. And so indeed, during one of my moments when, actually before the time of this slide, but I'll leave it here, to promote ISAR, I was trying to think of creative ways. Well, in the early 1980s, I think it might have been 83, there was a big blow up with AFA, American Federation of Astrologers. And a lot of the professional astrologers left AFA.
Oh.
And AFA says, don't bother us because we've catered to the newbies anyway. No big deal. And so as president of ISAR, and we were at another conference, I think it was a SWAC conference. A lot of times the professional astrologers sit out in the lobby and chat, and I was sitting next to Neil Mickelson, and had become a good friend too. He was president of NCGR. And I said, listen, Neil, why don't we, ISAR is small. We have some money saved in the safe. So we're financially solid. Now, we're not big. We don't have a big membership. NCGR had a huge membership.
Wow.
So I said, why don't we, ISAR and NCGR, go together and create our own conference instead of AFA, and bring all of the professionals to this new thing. He says, that's a great idea. I'm going to bring it up with the NCGR board. And within 2 weeks, AFAN says, hey, we want in on that too. Noel Till was the head of AFA at the time. And so Marion March was very important to the community. And then the importance of Marion March, and she became part of that group too, even though her school, it was Marion March that was the catalyst that brought us together. Because here, for an international person, she could teach, she could speak 5 languages fluently.
Wow.
And so internationally, she could talk to everybody.
Everyone.
She was the ambassador that got everybody internationally interested in UAC.
Wow.
And so, it took off. And so here, I love this quote from Walt Disney: quit talking and get busy doing.
All that cardinal earth, I think he has.
Yeah. And so here, Neil Mickelson here's Neil Mickelson, president of NCGR at the time. Mary March was international. She was born in Germany, speaks 5 languages fluently. Noel Till, beautiful baritone opera voice, and great astrologer. But I started preparing for this. I started thinking, all of these people are gone. You know, and here I am telling their story.
It's amazing. And again, that's why I said to you even before the recording, just how important these kind of interviews are, because of course, astrology is tapped into the zeitgeist right now and it's very, very popular. But for an audience to understand, you know, the work, how integral you have been in particular in these wonderful organizations, and just how difficult it must have been to get everyone together. I mean, I don't know, I've not been around long enough, but I can only think anecdotally, astrologers on the whole tend to be very independent minded. So trying to get people and groups together, but being integral, you being an integral part of all these organizations, just how important it is to share this story of astrology where it's been for the last 50 years or so.
Yeah, I certainly couldn't have done anything alone. But I'm saying, I mean, when you have teams like these people, then I've showed all these different slides. I mean, my heavens. Yeah, I mean, it's everybody who's anybody in 20th century astrology. So I had good teams.
Wonderful.
I was part of a team.
Fantastic.
So anyway, it became a thing. And the first, so it took us a couple of years to get organized and get the hotel and everything. But certainly, and there were others who were on the committee. And Marguerite Derboja, I congratulate her. She just a couple of weeks ago had her 100th birthday. So Marguerite can still tell the story.
Wow.
But there's not many left who can. Peggy Lance is still around. We're going to be at a conference next week.
Wonderful.
But you know, I'm telling the story of these people who have passed. Neil Mickelson was a computer programmer, one of the pioneers of getting astrology software going. We rely on it today.
Absolutely. I mean, all modernists, like all astrologers now, people coming through Kepler. I mean, you know, we are actually taught to create charts by hand, but a lot of the time when you're working with clients and you've only got an hour to do it and you're pulling up all this software, we've got to thank all these people standing on the shoulders of giants who created the software, who have put everything together for us, my generation and future generations, to be able to do their work, which is incredible.
Yeah. BC, we had to do our own hand calculation. So you had to be pretty fair at math to be an astrologer.
I only scraped through chart calculation, so I don't think I would survive back in that day.
But anyway, so here I'll go through here. In UAC 86, in the beginning, that was our first one. And I think there's going to be text coming up here.
Okay.
And indeed, at that first conference, down in the right-hand corner there, Jim Lewis, he was the founder of astrocartography, and I know a lot of astrologers are using that software. It's in SolarFire, their version of it, but the
so
concept,
important for this day and age, even for myself, leaving England to come to the United States, the Midwest, to the East Coast, to understand astrocartography and the effects of moving. So again, another wonderful founder.
Yeah, absolutely. But Jim Lewis said to us, he says to us, the group of who gathered the people together to create UAC, he says, you guys are crazy, because 2 weeks later, from the date that you have chosen for the conference in San Diego, is the AFA conference. Everybody's going to be at the AFA conference. So he's, so we figured there might be 300, 400, 500 people, maybe, if we had a good turnout. 1,300 came.
Wow.
from all around the world. We had 41 countries represented.
Wow, incredible.
Everybody who was anybody in astrology internationally came to San Diego. It was like Woodstock practically. And look at these tents. The hotel we had booked.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my heavens, there aren't any rooms. So we had to hire two or three other hotels, book, and we had to hire a shuttle bus to take the people back and forth. And we had to make these tents because there weren't enough classrooms.
I guess you didn't have enough chairs either for everybody to sit.
Well, we had to hire it all.
Oh, you hired?
It was a tent city, and everybody had a great time. Nobody complained.
Did anyone look astrologically for that event? That might be the case.
I think Mary and March might have elected
triple the amount of people. Yeah.
No, but we weren't prepared for it because and people would say we're new. You can't expect a big crowd and everything, and we were on the bay there. Funny story. At this conference, astrologers were on one side of the bay, and there was a ferry that went back and forth between another point on the mainland. And I can remember one of the days, the Jehovah's Witnesses were having a convention on the other side of the lake. Oh. And so on the ferry going back and forth, there were the astrologers and the Jehovah's Witnesses.
It's an interesting mix.
Oh, what do you do? Well, I'm an astrologer.
How did that go down?
Oh.
That's funny.
But, and then of course, Michael Luton, the history started there. He always put on a show. Mary March always gave him a budget that was, the tight budget. Michael always went extravagantly over, and the show was absolutely wonderful. He paid the difference himself. Sure. But he's well known for not only his astrology, he's a good astrologer, but his humor. And I mean, he's the star of the show, really.
I just finished an interview with him yesterday, and he was telling me the stories of dressing up as aliens and all these different stories. So I can't wait to share that one either.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of pictures of those. I didn't put everything in, and so now here we are. This is UAC 89, and so here by 1989, the Marion March Foundation has dedicated $5,000 to awards to excellence in astrology in 5 categories. And so the members of each of the organizations got to nominate and vote on, who is the tops in education, who is the leader in research, et cetera, and they got $1,000.
Wow.
And so that kept going. In fact, some of us are getting a little old now. Organizing conferences really is more than I want to handle.
Takes a lot.
But 2018 was the last one. People are already asking me, well, when's the next one?
So how much, in your experience, how much have these organizations and these events grown over the years from ISAR to UAC to AFN, all these large events? Has it just been bigger?
UAC is the gold crown of conferences. It's international.
Right.
Now ISAR has a good international coterie at this point, but they didn't always have. Yeah, UAC is the biggie, where everybody who's into astrology will not miss it. And it's rotated to different places all around the country. And indeed, probably we should have one in another country, maybe England. or
But again, you
Australia.
being so fundamental to the beginnings and then the creation of it, that's just an incredible, incredible story.
Yeah. So, here are these people getting awards, and, and you are at these gatherings. There's Michelle Gauquelin, there's, his wife, Francoise, and, Jeannie Siaglio, Karen Hamaker-Zondeg, Doris Chase Stone, all of these people, Stephen Forrest, everybody's there.
Wonderful.
So you're just other pictures. And in 1989, they had, we were in New Orleans. And so there was a boat cruise. The paddle boat. So that there's always a fun thing. There's always a great party. Always.
Wonderful. I was going to ask you, actually, I mean, the celebrations and the partying, and those must have been incredible experience with like-minded people who love astrology. I can't even imagine how wonderful those times must have been.
Astrologers love to party. Believe me, you're not going to have an astrology gathering without a party.
Right.
At
without
ISAR,
a few shandies.
at ISAR conferences, for instance, when Ray Merriman was in charge, you always had an ice cream social. He liked ice cream, so we had ice cream. Wonderful. And then a big dance afterwards. Yeah.
I can imagine some great ideas came from a lot of these astrological events and a lot of teams, collaborations, all those kind of things. Did you see that happen quite a lot, and different projects came out of these things? Yeah,
absolutely. UAC 92 was wonderful. It was in Washington, D.C. Of course, we had tours to the Capitol and all of the sites. But our keynote speaker was Joan Quigley. You can see this is her photo here. And of course, we all know she was the Reagan's astrologer. Now, of course, that was always in the tabloids. It was never openly admitted to by the president and Nancy openly to the public. Yes, we use astrologers, but she was their astrologer on everything. And indeed, he was out of office when she came in 1992.
And I believe Ronald Reagan would schedule everything around her advice, from not going to certain events or traveling on certain days, all these kind of things, and that's so fascinating.
She was Reagan's astrologer from their Hollywood days.
Wow.
But anyway, here's 6'7" Noel Till in the audience. And after her talk, there's a question answer, and he stands up and he says, "Joan, how were you paid?" She said, "Very carefully."
Very carefully.
Nancy's secretary wrote me a check.
So it wasn't direct, it had to be behind the scenes. And
oh, absolutely.
I mean, even today, I think presidents today, with people would ask questions. I can't even imagine back in
what would they do to Biden now if they found out he has an astrologer?
I'm sure they do. There's a quote somewhere. Who does it? JP Morgan talking about finance, where they said millionaires don't use astrologers, billionaires do. I've heard that somewhere. I don't know.
Yes. And listen, I'll tell you, and Ray Merriman is a good friend of mine, and he's a financial astrologer. His training was certainly in finance, and then he got into astrology, so he adds that. But clearly, the financial people will often, you will see them on the financial, they will invite astrologers as their guest.
Wow.
They don't care. If I can make money,
that's all they care about.
I don't care if it's astrology or not. It's their point of view.
Right. Yeah.
Show me how to make money, and if I make money at it, you're that.
Then I'm coming back to
welcome.
You. Right. Wow.
Yeah. Here are a few good pictures. I put this in because anybody who knew Lois Rodden, she was very saturnine. She would have wicked sense of humor. Here she is. This was a dress up banquet that we had. She's dressed up as a biker chick. and from the time she left the room until the end of the event. She stayed in character. She didn't then just become Lois Rodden, her sweet, very diplomatic self. She was the biker chick, the whole thing, and she acted it out. And she went over, and Glenn Perry and Michael Luton were sitting together talking, at a table. She went over and sat down right between them and said, put an arm around each one, said, "Hi, you guys, you want a party?" They were just they got up and left the room and went to the bar. We never saw them again that night.
Amazing.
But I mean, she had a wicked sense of humor. But
that's fantastic.
Normally she was a very proper, well-mannered, total Gemini, but with Saturn prominent in the chart.
That must have been an experience for everybody, knowing someone quite, studious maybe, and then to turn into this character. But to not break character, that's very Saturnian and discipline. It's like, yes, I'm staying in this character.
Boy, she got Michael Luton and then Glenn Perry. They would not believe afterwards. I said, that was Lois Rodden. And like, no.
They didn't believe.
Yeah, that was Lois Rodden.
You want to go hire a Harley and have some fun?
Yeah. Move you guys back up. A funny story. Now here we're in Monterey, UAC 95. I was the coordinator for that one. But here it was in Monterey, California. And in UAC, we tried to alternate between a urban setting and then a resort setting. And what we found out, and it's what kind of got us started, we found out the astrology community was getting old, and walking building to building and upstairs was difficult for them.
Right. Yeah.
They didn't like they get us to a hotel where there's an elevator and all of the amenities.
Sure.
But clearly, again, afterwards, there was a cabaret. Don't go to bed, go to Mikey's, which is Michael Luton's, and there's just a different show every night. I mean, astrologers love to party. And again, everybody came. 41, I think we had 43 countries represented one time.
Amazing.
So here, Anita Noya-Smith from South Africa, Christian Borup from Denmark. I mean, you could sit and eat with these people, chat with them. And I mean,
it must be, again, like maybe it is, sure it is for today, for people to go to these conferences, because you're reading books of all these different people and all the great work everyone's produced, but to actually meet these people in person just must be, a different, like for you in your early days, meeting with Zip Dobbins and, all these greats that you were learning from. And for people today to do the same thing with people who write books and meet people, incredible experiences.
Well, we can meet them on Zoom.
Oh, well, of course. Yeah.
They don't have to travel, but in the 70s, 80s, and then they traveled. They went on tour, just like a musician goes on tour.
Yeah. Because there was no technology to Skype and Zoom in, and I'm sure even a phone call was expensive at that point across country.
Yeah.
Or international.
Absolutely. So we had fun, and here we are again. This is Atlanta, Georgia. In Atlanta, Georgia, at this time, I was the chair of the board of UAC. And Michael Luton was dressed up as Scarlett O'Hara. And so when he came out on stage and he introduced the award ceremony, he came out as Scarlett O'Hara and went through the whole routine. It was absolutely roaring funny.
Michael Luton, praise for another day.
Yes. But astrologers love to have fun. And then here, I mean, for instance, here you have astrologers after the classes, after all the work is done, there's always an event. Always an event where there's a party. Here's we had a costume ball, and
Wow.
that there was a Harry Potter ice cream social, and everybody dressed in, and it was decorated like the Hogwarts, and everybody dressed in their gear. And then there's a big dance party afterwards. Here's Bruce Schofield. He's a musician too, a good one, a darn good one.
I've heard that. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Often he'll perform if you twist his arm and say, oh, okay,
He'll
James Coleman, so forth. But yeah, astrologers love to party. I want to make a point about Astro Databank here, and it's kind of backtracking a little bit. After those cards, 3x5 cards that we created for Lois Rodden, of all of the birth data, thousands of birth data that she had from famous people. She lived in Hollywood. Her husband was a musician and producer, so she knew a lot of people. Then in trying to digitize it, I wanted to point out ISAR, and a lot of people don't know this, that ISAR funded $10,000 worth to start to get the programmers to digitize all of that data.
Oh, wow.
To her goal, her mission was to have free data for astrologers forevermore. They don't have to pay for it.
Incredible.
And so it started as, she named it IDEA, IDEA. It was an acronym at first, but ISAR funded that to start it. And then Mark McDonough here took it from there and got it to the Astro Databank, as it was known. And indeed went through a couple of iterations from other owners, but then it was sold to Astrodeans. And now it's astro.com, part of all of the biographies.
Wow.
And the data our students at Kepler get.
It's such an important resource. And I think that brings to a wider point of all these wonderful astrologers, the love of the craft, because obviously, of course, astrologers have to eat, but all these people, putting their time and effort for the love of the craft, and to be able to give this for free for everybody in the world if they don't have means, but they can go on to astro.com, put in data, find data. You've got the Rodden rating, all these astrologers who have come together to provide the world with this wonderful resources is such an incredible feat, I feel, and for everybody, which is wonderful.
Absolutely. Yes. And I'm sure that Lois is happy in heaven to see her work still used. I mean, in teaching at Kepler, all of our beginning students use astro.com, Astro Databank.
That's how I started. Yeah, I would go in, and even to this day, if you're looking for a chart, and of course, the Rodden rating is so important. If I see the AA, I know it's happy days. Obviously, you still check, but once we start getting down to C or DD, your coin dirty data, then at least we know as astrologers, because again, I think you'll talk about this in a little bit in different slides, but the importance of time in.
Absolutely. Yeah. So here, Nick Campion, and I put this slide in because here are all, Joanne Wickenborg was the board chair for Kepler College. And here are Kepler College teachers, Demetra, George, Nick Campion, Georgia Sathis, each won $1,000. I mean, Kepler College dominated the awards.
Wonderful.
And indeed, we just, 6 months ago, got an award from the ISAR voters as favorite astrology school. So now tell me astrologers don't have fun. I mean, I mean, are they shy? No. I mean, everybody, even the oldest of us are out there dancing.
I love how you bring in the fun into these presentations, because of course, many of us, sometimes we take our days too seriously, or obviously we're either studying or clients and stuff, but to let loose and have a good time with people, that's such an important factor.
Astrologers, I mean, that's their mantra. I mean, you work hard and you play hard.
Play hard.
Enjoy life. It's here and now.
Yeah,
absolutely. Now, then, Kepler College. I was asked to join the Kepler College board in 2000. And they like to have I mean, it was Kepler College, let me begin with, got its authorization as a degree granting college, a liberal arts college, a 4-year liberal arts college. That was what our authorization was for. The founders actually had envisioned a trade school. But the director of the Washington State Education Board was retiring, and to clear her desk, she just automatically gave, yeah, liberal arts done, send us the, so our authorization was a degree granting liberal arts college.
Wow.
Well, when you're a liberal arts college, you need to be offering languages, sciences. I mean, you have to have a multi, and we're just a little school with 50 students. And to
so the curriculum had to have a standard to pass this board, or in the state regulations, those kind of things.
Exactly, exactly. If you're a authorized school anywhere in the United States, and I think internationally, you need to then have one other step, an accreditation, either regional or national accreditation, where somebody comes in, evaluates your program, costs you money.
Yeah.
But you know, it goes through the process that you meet high educational standards. And the argument that we had in trying to get authorized for you know, that permanency is that, well, we don't have anybody who's a professor at a university who can evaluate somebody who's teaching astrology.
Right.
You know, so it was the A word, the scarlet letter, astrology.
Of course, the bias against astrology in the academic world.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, indeed. Yes. So my begin doing with a new phase, when the board said, you know, Kepler College was struggling. It had gone through 2 or 3 presidents in the first 3 years, or, you know, one each year. And so Joanne Wickenberg, board chair at the time, said to me, well, Carol, you have appropriate degrees. Will you take over the presidency of the college and just see what you can do? And if we have to close it down, okay. Just try, see what you can do. So I said, okay. So I get to Kepler College, and here these 2 people in place, Lee Lehman, Dr. Lee Lehman, and Dr. Dennis Harness, were the heads of the college in terms of education. And so I walked into this team as their leader, and I'm looking at them, my heavens. They're my leader. But the thing is, I had taught high school for quite a number of years, for 40 years, and was retired. And I had organized several graduations, so I knew exactly the regalia and all the stuff that needed to be done. And 2003 fall, when I came in, the first class that entered Kepler in 2000 was going to graduate in 9 months later, in June of 2001. So I had the responsibility of planning Kepler's first graduation.
Wow.
The first group of bachelor's degree graduates. There were 8 of them.
Wow.
And so then everybody in the community, I mean, the world community, was so thrilled with, here's Kepler back in academia, giving academic degrees that are recognized by a state and with authorization. And so they donated to you know, $100 here, $50 there, to put on a big extravaganza party after the graduation. And so here we were. Oh, here's the faculty I had to work with. Oh my.
Not too bad, not too shabby.
I mean, I mean, give me a break. I didn't have to worry about the classes and who's teaching what. I mean, so just go do your thing. I'll organize the graduation. I'll try to keep the finances straight and so forth.
Now in terms of academia, a lot of these legendary astrologers actually, did they go back in part because of Kepler College to get PhDs and whatnot?
Yes, and right now, at the time, the reason they were the heads of the curriculum of the college, because Dennis had a PhD and Lee had a PhD. None of these others had finished their PhD. But after 2012, when we had to go vocational, by then Bruce Schofield had gotten his PhD. Clearly, I would say that Mark Urban Lorraine had a PhD. He taught at Michigan State. Demetra and Georgia both have master's degree, but Nick Campion got his PhD. Rob Hand got his PhD. So they got motivated. So yeah, we have astrologers who work in universities who could authorize Kepler now.
Incredible. So for Kepler College was the first worldwide astrology, academic wise, but having astrology.
Yeah, Nick Campion's school he was working for Kepler.
Wow.
He didn't create his own school. Well, he had a school, but it wasn't an authorized school like Kepler College was. It was only when we had to 2012 had to switch that he has now a legitimate master's authorized accredited master's degree program in England.
Wow. And I know because Kepler College has gone through several transitions, but is Kepler College the oldest established astrological school per se?
There was one other astrology school that has since gone out of business, but I think Ina Stanley is first with the IAA, and that has changed names over the years, but the last 20 years it's been IAA.
Interesting.
Yeah, so she was first, and then
certainly Kepler College is one of the longest running astrology schools in the world, right?
Yes. 1992 is when our 501c3 was authorized.
Interesting.
That's when Kepler College was born, but we didn't have the organization and the faculty and the resources to get an actual astrology course.
And of course, you're playing such an important role, not only in the astrological organizations that you've been involved with, either being president or vice president, co-founder of UAC, but coming into Kepler College at a time where they were struggling and just being an integral part of why Kepler College is here today. Why myself, as a graduate of Kepler College, have to thank you and other graduates because of the work you've done and led for this new generation to come through and to do that, which is everyone. And again, we thank you so much for being an integral part of this. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't have gone through and the rest of the graduates. And
well, I just had a small part. I look at the team I had to
work
with.
I mean, obviously with a fantastic
absolutely. Yeah. So all of these people, if this was the first group that we had. And what was unique about the degree grant in Kepler College is that once each term, all of the students and all of the faculty flew into Seattle, Washington, and we had a hotel booked, and the live interaction between the teachers and the students, and sitting around talking after class and having lunch together and everything. I mean, we had person-to-person contact, not just Zoom, real people. So, I mean,
and of course, Zoom is great that we can, at Kepler now, having students from all around the world, but there must be something special again about being in person with people as well.
Sharing lunch and talking and chatting, having a party afterwards. And so here's our first graduation. I had them all robed up and everybody. I'm in the center there. Here's Lee Lehman, Where's Dennis? Is that Dennis? So it's hard to see there. Rob Hand had just finished speaking. And here, the first graduation was at the Seattle Asian Art Museum. Here's a picture of it. And it wasn't in the museum itself. It was in the auditorium adjacent.
Interesting.
But that was where we had our graduation, and it was packed full. And after the speakers presented and the awards were given, the diplomas given out, all of the families, all of the students and faculty and everything, there was a big banquet in the banquet hall that the donations from around the world, astrologers around the world,
wonderful.
We had a buffet, a lovely buffet that everybody enjoyed. I mean, it was a party. It was really
another
fabulous.
party.
Yeah, absolutely fabulous.
Wonderful.
Very proud of that. And here are the first graduates. There were eight of those people, and some of them are teaching astrology and counseling astrologers. We did have got response from all of these people last year when Lindy Birch passed away, and so I sent out an email to all of them, and fortunately they still have the same email address, and they all responded and wrote something. So nice. There's still cohesion 20 years later.
Wow, that's wonderful. And again, it brings to our condolences to the family of Linda Birch, and it brings a wider point of the sense of community like we have at Kepler here. So, me being involved with 101, helping out with Donna and Vanessa, and seeing these students come through, but sticking together, having their own cohorts. They'll go out and have their own meetings, and just the excitement you see in people that maybe in their hometown, maybe they're in the Midwest where astrology is still a taboo subject, and being able to connect with people around the world and have that sense of community, I think is a wonderful part of Kepler College. And of course, there are many fantastic self-taught astrologers, but again, to have this sense of community where you've just said here, 20 years later, people are still either, sending messages or keeping in touch. I think that's a wonderful part of the astrological community.
Yeah. Yeah. And here in the front is Lee Lehman and Dennis Harness, but Georgia Stathis is on one side and Demetra George on the other.
Wonderful.
Rob Hand is in the back, and Mark Urban Lorraine over here. I think I was probably taking the picture. I don't need to be there. But I mean, it's a proud day. This is the next graduation. But clearly, we had, and Laura Nalbandian was on the Kepler board.
Wonderful.
Her mother was the founder of Kepler College.
Yep.
So we're a happy family.
Wonderful.
So here are the classes when I was president. Certainly there are others, but it's fun to see them at conferences now, and they'll come up and say, "Hi, you remember me?" It's wonderful.
It must be interesting to hear what everyone, when you see them periodically, to ask what they've been doing, how they've taken on with astrology, still practice, or what they might be doing. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah,
wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. But Dennis Harden, Kenneth Miller. I mean, he was served a year or 2 years as Kepler College president too. So, we kind of, bring good people in to lead. But clearly, the reason I put this here, Kenneth Miller and Lynn Bodis took master's degrees in astrology. Wonderful. From Kepler College. I think there were 8 people who got master's degrees, and then they're honored at other colleges around the world.
Fantastic.
A couple of them of theirs have gotten PhDs. Lynn Bodis is and both of these are both Indian astrologers. Is their specialty. But Lynn was, quick story about Lynn. She used to come to ISAR conferences when we were in Southern California. We were a little small. She was one of our loyal person. She was a medical doctor.
Ah.
And indeed, she became Lois Rodden's primary doctor.
Wow.
And so
Really?
the last years of Lois's life, Lynn Budis was her doctor.
Wow.
And I was there too, by her bedside to the end.
Wow.
And so again, at Lois Rodden's wake, it was a big party because that's what she wanted.
Wow.
And indeed, Zip Dobbins passed away. Lois, and I think there's just a few weeks difference between one and the other. And again, it was a big party. And I remember Zip Dobbins. There was a big photo of Zip on the table, and it was her younger days. You know, she might have been 18 in her tap dance outfit. And what?
She'd have been watching everyone having a good time at the party.
Oh yes, yes. Wonderful. That's what Lois would want. That's what Zip would want. Wonderful. Have a good time.
Yeah. And
mingle with each other and talk and, be real.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
Yeah. So here, Rob Hand's getting an award. Funny story about this. It was a surprise. He got the Mark Edmund Jones Award, and he got a cash prize of $3,000. And he said afterwards, when he accepted it, he said, and I've forgotten what the delineation was, but he said, I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised because I looked at my chart before I came here, and I have Jupiter transiting my midheaven. So yeah. And so I get this and said, yeah, okay, my chart works.
Wonderful. And I think he's got such a strong Jupiter natally as well, doesn't he?
Yeah,
so, Wonderful.
Yeah. So now this is transitioning to the degree program that we now have, and is going very well. Thanks to you, Callum. Oh, no. And your marketing, you're part of the marketing team, and you guys are wonderful. I am so happy. And we have other good help now in the office that keeps our books straight, and the the computer
classes going and all the in the background, because those are the people who do the real work. I'm talking behind the scenes, who keep all the nuts and bolts together. We're just fresh faces out there, but people who do the real work, I have a lot of appreciation for the people who do the work behind the scenes. And absolutely, yeah.
And for 12 years after I was turned the presidency over, Enid Newberg took it, and again, she was just recently retired as president. But I'm telling you, Enid is a genius. I mean, she was great at the computer programming, and she was a master at the technical stuff. I couldn't do that. I mean, I know enough technology to get in trouble. I don't know enough technology to get out of trouble.
Right.
Enid could fix it always.
Wonderful.
But in other words, she and Karen Macaulay was director of education for many years. Those were the only two paid positions, modestly paid, I would say, for years.
Wonderful, yeah.
And everything else was done volunteer. And so we were limping along and leaping with impact on students. I mean, the graduations grew bigger and bigger. We have a lot of people now with KPDA behind their name, Kepler College Professional Diploma.
And that's me. I need to put it behind. I always forget.
You need to put it behind your name. I
always forget to put them behind names.
Don't forget that. That's a way to advertise Kepler, and it's true. It's earned. It's a 4-year degree. It's a 4-year diploma of work. So we haven't given up our standards at all. The rigor is still there, as it was when Rob Hand and Lee Lehman and Dennis Harness and those people were teaching. It just now is
I have
all
very, I
related
have
to
very little
astrology.
patience, so I did mine in 3 years. I was like, I'm going to get this done, and I want to do it.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Well, then you went through the summers.
That's right. That's right.
But in the degree granting thing, Rob Hand taught Latin. When we had to have languages. Demetra George taught Greek. What else did we have? We had another language. I can't remember who it was. But in other words, these people who are bilingual said, okay, I grew up here. I know this. And certainly Rob Hand is a Latin scholar. So we covered that. Lehman's PhD is in botany.
Wow.
So she taught science. So in other words, we got it done, but the issue was trying to get the final accreditation. So this diploma program is still going. And I looked at our enrollment for this term, this winter term. We have 153 students enrolled in classes. Not bad for a struggling school.
Absolutely.
It's not struggling anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And again, this is why you're putting these interviews together and really just getting Kepler College, the name out there. I mean, it is already, but to a wider world public, and just showing, how esteemed the college is for producing wonderful astrologers, and how long it's been around, and the people who have come through to teach. And I know some people have gone off to do other things, but again, just how established Kepler College is. So,
yeah. And actually at the recent ISAR conference in Denver, Colorado, we had a booth there, and we had several of us teaching a class invited to present. But we were very surprised, and the ISAR organization sent out a ballot to all of their members. I think they have about 2,500 members or more. And there were several things that they got to vote on. And one of them was favorite astrology school. And when they called Kepler College's name, we went, wow.
That's great.
So I have a big trophy here. It's glass, so it doesn't show up well if I just hold it. But ISAR was awarded by ISAR voters, membership.
Wonderful.
As favorite astrology school. So
fantastic.
Very proud of that.
Absolutely.
And certainly Karen McCauley and Eden Newberg and all of the faculty of Kepler College.
And Enid and Karen, who I'm hoping to interview soon as well, when we can get hold of them.
Yes. Enid and some of the others try. Karen, and I'm a little bit older than Karen also. Enid and some of the other younger astrologers trying to get Karen and I to tell some inside stories about people in the astrology community who passed away. And we've made a pact. Some stories need not be told.
Need not be told. That's right. Some stories need to be kept strong.
Yeah, astrologers are a colorful group, and they enjoy fun. So now. Years ago, and again, Lois Rodden kind of encouraged me to this. She made it a point of how important birth time was. Precise birth time. I mean, that was her thing. And so as I advanced my study in astrology, I began to focus in on birth time. And all of the discrepancies of birth time and all of the problems that astrologers have with birth time, and tried to put it into a format that the average astrologer could figure out some techniques to verify the birth time and or modify it. So when I taught for Ina Stanley in IAA, can't remember what it was called before IA, but anyway, I prepared for their movement classes. Ina taught the beginning. But beyond basics, tools for the consulting astrologer, that's for counseling and that type of thing. And it was used in one of the courses that I taught.
Wonderful.
For many years afterwards. I kept getting a royalty, so I think they used it up until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And then beyond basics, it's not digital, it's all text. In other words, it's not but the it came on a CD disc,
right?
And then that book was Moving the Chart in Time, dealing with what moving activates the natal chart. And certainly we know the natal chart, those are the planets that are activated by moving factors. And everything is important in the chart, but not every actor is on the stage at the same time. They're kind of in the background waiting their turn until something comes along moving to activate it. And so then I created the 2000 version that's now out of print. And now the complete book of chart rectification is in the Kepler College store. It's only in PDF format. In fact, AFA is going to print it for me and make it into a book format, but I haven't signed that contract.
And we'll put a link in the video to the description as well for people watching.
But
and of course, the complete book of chart rectification, and as well as your other book, but such an important book for the astrological community, because essentially, and at the end of the day, if you don't have a correct birth time, you've got nothing. You've got nothing right. This is such an important piece of work.
Well, the key thing, Colin, is if you're a consulting astrologer and you have a client, and clients do not come just for fun. They have something on their mind and they want a forecast. And usually they don't want to look in the past. They know what happened.
Right.
They want to look, they have something on their mind that this year they want more information on.
Right.
And you can't forecast accurately without correct birth time. Because those angles, the ascendant moves 1 degree every 4 minutes of clock time.
Right.
So if your birth time is 4 minutes off, your forecast can be a year off.
Absolutely. And people don't realize even to the minute is so important. Yeah.
So I just provide examples and tools. One thing in the new book that I really emphasized that I did not in the first book: before you start trying to rectify, to adjust the birth time, think about the person's biography that they have sent you or their events and develop a case theory. If the person has been I have one fellow who had been in the ministry and then got a regular job, but he still kept touch with the ministry. So I'm looking, well, there must be something in the 9th house, or maybe something's emphasized in Sag, or in other words, think about it.
Right.
With your astrology tools. What would I expect with this? I had another client who's a motocross racer, and in looking at the chart. Now, the planets are not going to change if you move the birth time. So it's the same sign, degree, and minute. But I saw in his chart, the Mercury is at 0 degrees Cancer, and the Mars is at 0 degrees Libra. Square each other at cardinal points. I got, okay. Are you? Do you enjoy danger?
Right.
Do you communicate action? And
and of course you've coined the term event hooks as well. So looking for the biography, it's unfortunate to speak about them, but obviously tragic moments in people's lives, because they're always going to remember specific times, and usually it's the tragic ones that stays in the mind. Sometimes you might, a wedding, things like that. Surely, but, I mean, what do you say?
Weddings can be problems because there are different kinds of weddings all around the world. I mean, normally in Americans, we're thinking, oh yeah, there's a, presents and there's a big cake and, lots of fun and joy. However, other parts of the world, many times, certainly ancient times, marriages were arranged by the parents.
Of course.
It was a business deal.
Forced marriages, things like that.
They learned to like and respect each other. And then I can look at a chart, and I often will say to, if I see something really difficult there, I could, there are weddings where father says, and you will marry her.
Wow, yeah. Shotgun.
Shotgun, yeah, shotgun. Well, it's not the same.
Right.
So there's so many different variations. Whereas a surgery, I had my knee surgery done. Oh, that's a certain time, specific place, specific date.
Right. You have to narrow down as much as possible. That makes sense.
Whereas marriage or, some of those events, or even an illness like such as cancer. Well, I mean, it's so
too ambiguous. It's not.
It's when did it start, or when did you know what I mean? It's harder, even though it's difficult. So the abrupt events are the ones that are easier to hook into.
Right.
That's interesting. But there are joyous events, certainly, that you can hook into, but usually the ones that are painful are the ones that people remember. Oh, I remember not only the specific date, but I remember the time.
Right.
Whereas otherwise, the vacation in Hawaii that was so wonderful. Yeah, I think that was in 1955.
Right. See,
I mean, they don't remember.
So nebulous.
Yeah.
So you can take these events and the biography, as you say, and then start to work and start to rectify.
Yeah. Wonderful. So here I am now teaching at Kepler College, and I do teach rectification class, but I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm kind of in the next year going to back off a little bit because I believe I will have a Uranus return next year. And I think it's time to the young astrologers with good credentials and indeed a better education that I had to put together piece by piece, move into teaching those classes. So
again, that's why everyone should be so thankful for, again, your body of work through all these different decades, and just how coming from a time when it was difficult to find other astrologers, and the work that you put in, again, being integral to these astrological organizations, being so integral to the success and the survival of Kepler College. And again, for generations now, or future generations watching this video, for instance, just to see the people behind the success and where they go, and forever grateful for everything.
There's a lot happening in the 21st century, and indeed huge credits to Robert Schmidt, Robert Zoller, and Robert Hand, and even Meira Epstein for the translation of the ancient texts. I mean, we astrologers now have so much more information than we had as modern astrologers in the mid 20th century.
Well, thank you for such a wonderful presentation. So another question I'd love to ask you is, what advice, given your wonderful experience in the decades that you've been involved in astrology, what advice would you give to young astrologers such as myself, or people graduating or starting their practice? What words of advice or wisdom, what would you like to share with other astrologers?
Take advantage of learning your craft first and learning it well. When I started out, there was really no place. Certainly the major cities had, like Los Angeles had Church of Light, but I wasn't enthralled with that. You need to, in the old days, or in the mid 20th century, you'd buy a book, you would read that, and you say, oh yeah, I got that. But now that doesn't answer other questions that I have. So I buy another book, read that, and so on. You're kind of self-teaching, and indeed you're bouncing off of these other astrologers.
Mm.
And so you're getting good information here, good information there. What Kepler and other schools do is have a progressive program that guides you step by step. Instead of fits and starts, you're learning in a gradual arc.
We have many students even now who say, you know, they pick up bits and pieces from reading, or they watch certain podcasts. So as you're saying, they're picking up bits and pieces, but to be able to synthesize and to delineate is a whole different kettle of fish, where you have to have, in my view, a structured course or structured lessons like at Kepler that we do, from the fundamentals programs from 101 to 102, 3 and 4.
Exactly.
Then you go into your classes such as the movement, the basics of movement, and then of course you can get even deeper with rectification and so on. But having a structure and a background, a fundamental program to help people have a solid education in astrology.
Yeah. And then there are electives, because once you have your foundational classes, really at Kepler, it's the first 2 years. Then you go into your electives where you specialize what kind of astrologer you are. Are you interested in Hellenistic? Well, then we have advanced classes. You want to be a traditional astrologer, you want to be a modern astrologer, you want to get into harmonics. Yeah. You know, there are specialty areas.
I think that's one of the benefits of Kepler College and why I love my journey so much, because it wasn't these are the right paths or this is the right path. It was literally, here's all the paths. Which one would you like to dabble in? You know, could dabble here if you want to take on that road, and that's what I love.
Yes.
I have a very mutable chart anyway, so I do like to swap and change. So I was like, I'll go down here for a little bit, I'll go down here for a bit. And then I found my way more in, you know, maybe more traditional text, I think, as you go down. But again, Kepler gave students that option and does give students those options to choose their own path.
Yes. And indeed, Kepler College does accept transfer credits from other schools. For instance, there are specialty schools like Chris Brennan's, who, by the way, is a Kepler College graduate.
Right.
Hellenistic astrology. Well, if there aren't enough Hellenistic astrology courses at Kepler, go to Chris Brennan School and take it and transfer it back in towards your diploma.
Absolutely.
Or, you know, we do that. There's several other schools who have rigor in their programs that we will accept transfer credits.
Wonderful.
But they have to have done homework. They have to have, you know, there's some academic rigor there.
And then it shows Kepler the depth and breadth of what's available and the courses available. Yeah. So that's right. Wonderful too. And sorry, I have a list of questions here. What was my next one I was going to ask? We've talked about certification, so that's
yeah.
So here's more of a philosophical question for you, where you've seen astrology from the 70s all through these decades, from where astrology's been and where it is today. Where do you see astrology going maybe in the next 20, 40 or 100 years? I know that's quite a long question, but from what you've seen and your experiences, what are your thoughts around this?
Wow. What are my dreams for the future? First of all, astrology is growing in the world. We have students at Kepler from all around the world. I mean, every continent. And amazingly, most of them show up for live chat whenever it is. It could be 2 a.m, but they're there in the Zoom meeting. But the idea that the ancient discipline, I mean, it wasn't invented in the 20th century by far. In fact, 20th century astrology sometimes had it wrong. You know, there's a lot of things that were experimented with because we didn't have that ancient knowledge. There was about a 200 gap between 1700 and 1900 where astrology was thrown out of the church and the academia. And it was, you know,
so you had the theological intolerance of astrology, and also right. the what became more modern materialistic scientific viewpoint that kind of squeezed astrology from all angles. I guess it seems.
But I think it's growing in worldwide,
absolutely,
and around the world. And there are people. I mean, it is a service that astrologers work independently. And that's in a sense, in the old days, it used to be kind of a lonely thing because you were in your office and you would see a client and then maybe 2 or 3 clients a day. Stephen Forrest says he does 4 clients a day. That's hard work.
That must be a lot.
Yeah, but I'm just saying you're working alone. So but now with Zoom and all of the connections that we have, technology wise, it's booming in the populace around the world. So I think it's going to, it's a major player even now.
Absolutely. And again, as we've mentioned before, tap into the zeitgeist at the moment. And I've seen now the younger generations, and I know there's Pew Research out there that a lot of the younger generations, including myself, millennials, and then the Gen Z, we're starting to move away from organized religions. And you see that shift now. And I know the nones are getting big. I don't want to make this a theological debate, but it seems that a lot more of these generations, our younger generations, are starting to shift into astrology.
Yeah.
And again, with technology. So some of it is gateway astrology. So you have a lot of, again, sun sign stuff with memes on TikTok and all these different platforms. So the gateway astrology stuff is fantastic because it gets people interested.
Yeah.
And eventually, if you want to take it more seriously, you come to places like Kepler.
Yeah. And indeed, astrology really doesn't, it's not in the same realm of religion. It's religion is based on faith, and that's wonderful. But astrology is a tool, and indeed there are references to astrology in the Bible, and in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And in the Old Testament, it's described as I've forgotten the words. I have it somewhere in my memory, but like a map. The heavens are a map.
Interesting.
To guide us. And indeed, from beginnings of history, people watched the heavens, and certain things they would observe happened when certain planets or bodies were in alignment.
And of course, over centuries, we have 3 wise men. I think we've just put up a video around Christmas time of Christine Ehrens, if I'm saying her name correctly, who did a wonderful presentation on the Star of Bethlehem and trying to put those pieces together. So all these stories are fantastic. Yeah, and Christine Ehrens was president of the Kepler board for a number of years. So yeah, I mean, but it is a way of incorporating the world around us in the heavens and what we see above us, and as an influence. And even the researchers know, for instance, at a full moon, every doctor knows surgery, you're going to have more bleeding. Duh. I mean, really, astrologer could tell you that. Yeah, I mean, there's research that scientists deny that the roots of science were astrology, and astrology and astronomy were one for millennia. Do you see that? Do you see the marriage coming back again? Yes, but the scientific community is pretty rigid, and they're in denial that no. But if you look, reading the ancient texts, absolutely, they were married. They were 2 sides of a coin. They were married. And so it's the idea that, certainly religion, I think, is another thing. It's, faith that there's life after death, for instance. Oh, sure, of course. Well, astrology doesn't do that. I mean, that's not where we are. Right. And indeed, with working with students, and you see a chart that is just horrible. I say my 50 years of experience as an astrologer, 95% of the time, whatever is very difficult, very challenging, people put one foot in front of the other, do what needs to be done, and they go beyond it. They don't die.
They might think they're going to die. It hurts so bad, for instance. But, you know, we all face challenges, and that's part of growth. And if you're not growing,
it takes friction to create a diamond.
yeah. I mean, if you've stopped growing, that's the definition of death.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Fantastic. So the last question we've got for you today is, I guess, well, you kind of answered it yourself with what's next. So you're still teaching rectification and the movement courses, and you're talking about stepping back, which I'm very sad to hear next year. So are you still going to be teaching for the rest of this year into next year? How's that?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Even after that, I'll still continue the rectification class.
Wonderful.
I might say that Marguerite Darboja, who just turned 100, emailed me back today just before I met with you. And she says, yes, I have 3 books getting published. She's 100 years old.
Wow.
So I'll be writing something else. I'm not quitting. It's time for the younger people like you to do the
changing.
Yeah.
Well, like you said before, I'm nowhere near your league, so I've got many more moons to go before I even become close, if ever. Well, thank you so much, Carol. This has been, again, I was so looking forward to this interview. Such a delight. And thank you. Such a wonderful presentation. I love all the photos and everything that you put together.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. And thank you for sharing your life story in astrology. And again, for everything that you've done for the astrological community.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carol.
Bye.